Well, I guess, everybody has a youth and a growing up period, and I somehow managed through that. But I always liked animals, and I always uh, found some kind of work caring for animals, working for a veterinarian. I was at one point going to be a veterinarian, and I took a course in zoology and fish and wildlife management, and just thought, wow, I got to work outdoors and study something wild. And my professor actually was, uh, he'd come back from expeditions in Africa, and I was just thrilled with the possibility of going there. But I changed universities from UC Berkeley to University of California at Davis in order to go to vet school, which where that was located, and took anatomy, and really became fascinated with anatomical structure, form and function. How do things work? And I was curious about how do whales, dive so deep, breathe so infrequently. Their whole physiology and anatomy is just at the extreme. And so I went down to a whaling station and began to collect specimens. And the biologist there saw that I could tolerate the stench and was willing to be there all night. And so he hired me to be his field biologist. And then I went tagging whales at sea and saw live whales and thought, wow, this is really amazing. Um, and just about that time, people were taking pictures of whales and beginning to start to tell them apart. You always had stories of Moby Dick, the white whale. Yeah, they're unusual pigmented whales that go back clear in history. But in the 60s, 35 millimeter photography was becoming affordable. I started taking photographs, and I got during the Vietnam years, I had a military obligation, and I went for 8 years into the Navy, and they threw me in a briar patch of sonar, and I just fell in love with sonar. What the whales were saying. I was supposed to be listening to submarines, and of course I did, but whale stuff was more interesting and actually more difficult to track. But I couldn't tell anybody because it was secret work. But I got out of the Navy after the Vietnam years, and first job I was offered was by my boss that I had been tagging whales for. He said, count up the killer whales in Puget Sound. We got a project that needs doing. So I did, and saw immediately that this is an entirely known population. We can do this for a few years and get the dynamics, like how fast they grow up and how long they live and how many babies they have, etc. And maybe even some of the social structure. So off and running, here we are.